Pope Francis has really surprised everyone by officially stepping down, which marks a big change for the Catholic Church. But the real jaw-dropper? The guy who's set to take over, Cardinal Luis Tagle. He's known for being a caring reformer, but he's also got his share of controversies hanging around. Tagle's journey to becoming Pope isn't exactly a walk in the park. With his close connection to Francis, his progressive views, and his approach to China, he's stepping into a church that's pretty divided between sticking to tradition and embracing change. So, why did Pope Francis trust Tagle so much? Can he really bring together a church that's feeling pretty fractured? So please subscribe the channel. Over the past 10 years, Pope Francis has been a game changer, shaking up traditions that have been around for centuries and focusing on mercy, inclusion, and justice. But here's the twist. Those close to him are saying he feels like his mission is done. Yup, done. He thinks it's time for someone new to lead the church into the future. Behind the scenes, in private chats with his top aides, he's apparently found peace with this decision. And let's be real, his time as Pope hasn't been all smooth sailing. He's had to deal with long-standing issues in the church and global crises that have been pretty overwhelming. But through it all, he's never lost faith that the church can adapt and meet the needs of its followers in a changing world. That's a legacy worth celebrating. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Rumor has it that Pope Francis might have already picked his favorite successor. Technically, the new pope is chosen by a conclave of cardinals, a secretive and sacred process. But let's face it, a departing pope's influence is pretty significant. As for who this next leader might be, that's still a mystery. But insiders are hinting that it'll be someone who shares Francis's vision for a church that's more inclusive, socially aware, and in tune with the modern world. Imagine a leader who doesn't just carry the torch, but reignites it, lighting the way to a more connected and compassionate future. And the timing couldn't be more fascinating. This big decision comes during the Jubilee of Hope, a global celebration launched by Francis on Christmas Eve 2020, meant to inspire renewal, reflection, and hope in a world facing huge challenges. It's a moment where millions are encouraged to dream of a brighter future. Now, unexpectedly, it might also mark the closing chapter of Pope Francis's transformative papacy. But what makes this moment so special isn't just the timing. It's Pope Francis himself. Those who know him say he's at peace with his legacy. He's been bold in opening discussions on topics that were once off-limits in the Church, tackling climate change and pushing for reforms in the Vatican's financial practices. He hasn't just led, he's redefined what leadership looks like. These are bold moves that will echo through history. Yet, there's a catch. Even as he steps down, Pope Francis knows there's still a lot of work to be done. The transition of papal leadership is no easy feat. It's a process with deep-rooted traditions and specific steps that have to be followed. If the rumors are true, he might be following in Pope Benedict XVI's footsteps by choosing to resign instead of serving until death. If that happens, it would be only the second papal resignation in modern history. Just think about that for a second. Centuries of tradition changing in just one decade. Within Vatican City, the buzz about this potential change is growing. There's a mix of excitement and uncertainty in the air. This isn't just about switching leaders, it's about the future of the Church. How will this transition affect its stance on some of the biggest issues we face today, like the role of women, inclusion of LGBTQ Catholics, and the urgent need to tackle clerical abuse? These are crucial crossroads, and whoever steps into Francis's shoes will have to carry on his vision while also carving out their own path in a fast-changing world. When we talk about Pope Francis, we're not just talking about a leader of the Catholic Church. He's a global figure. His focus on social justice, caring for the environment, and interfaith dialogue has made him a transformative presence, not just for the Church, but for the whole world. As the rumors about his departure grow louder, one thing is clear: the impact will be felt far and wide, across politics, social movements, and spiritual communities everywhere. Meanwhile, within the Vatican, there's a quiet buzz. Preparations are reportedly in motion for what could be one of the most historic announcements in recent memory. So, the big question is, how's Pope Francis going to let the 1.3 billion Catholics around the world know about his decision? And what's this farewell moment going to look like? Whoever steps into his shoes is going to have a huge task ahead. The next pope will take over a church that's at a really important crossroads, trying to balance the old ways with the new. It's all about finding that sweet spot between tradition and progress. But as we look at this turning point, it seems like the next pope might already be coming into focus within the sacred traditions of the conclave. The choice for the next pope rests with the College of Cardinals, this elite group who will gather in the Sistine Chapel once Pope Francis officially steps down. It's a process that's filled with tradition and a bit of mystery. But make no mistake, Pope Francis's influence will definitely be felt in that room. Every choice he made and every cardinal he promoted points to the kind of leader he hopes will carry on his vision. Among the names being whispered, one really stands out: Cardinal Luis Tagle from Italy. Even though he was born in the Philippines, Cardinal Tagle is more than just a charming leader. He represents everything Pope Francis has been about. He's known for his deep compassion and smart theology, and he's spent years fighting for the poor and marginalized, really echoing Pope Francis's message. He's not just a leader. He's a bridge builder and a unifier. Most importantly, he's a voice for those who really need it. What makes Cardinal Tagle special isn't just his vision. It's his knack for turning that vision into real action, making a difference in people's lives all over the globe in inspiring ways. Take his work in sub-Saharan Africa, for example. In a place where many Catholics are facing tough economic challenges, Tagle didn't just give them kind words. He brought real solutions. Under his guidance, the Vatican teamed up with local communities to fund schools and job training programs. He aimed to create sustainable opportunities to help families rise out of poverty while also strengthening their faith. His initiatives didn't just give people hope. They gave them the tools to change their lives, all while showing the Church's commitment to their spiritual and material well-being. And Africa is just one part of the story. Over in Myanmar, a country struggling with political and ethnic issues, Tagle stepped in with a bold plan for peace. He knew that healing wasn't just about fixing political rifts. It was about bringing different faiths together. He created spaces for dialogue, promoting understanding and unity in a place that desperately needed hope. His belief in the Church as a force for peace and healing became a guiding light for communities trying to move past their differences. But Cardinal Tagle's influence doesn't stop there. He's also a global advocate for compassion and action, especially for some of the most vulnerable people out there. As president of Caritas International, he led the Share the Journey campaign, which raised awareness about the struggles of migrants and refugees. But here's the thing: Tagle didn't just talk about the dignity of displaced people from afar. He actually visited refugee camps in Lebanon and Jordan, meeting people face to face, listening to their struggles, fears, and hopes. His empathy was more than just heartfelt. It was hands-on. By using his platform to amplify their voices, Tagle reminded everyone that these aren't just statistics. They're real people with stories that need to be heard. Cardinal Luis Tagle is definitely a standout figure in the global church scene. His approach to social justice issues, like climate change, poverty, and migration, comes from a real sense of urgency and compassion. These aren't just abstract ideas to him. He sees them as big systemic challenges that the Church needs to face head-on. Tagle has been a strong advocate for the Vatican to team up with secular groups and actually make a difference. He envisions a church that doesn't just talk about justice, but gets out there and makes it happen, working alongside the global community. So, what makes Tagle so compelling? It's not just his charm or empathy, it's also his close connection to Pope Francis. Over the years, they've bonded over a shared vision for a compassionate and inclusive church. Their relationship is built on trust and teamwork, with a mission to bring Catholic teachings to life in a way that really clicks with people. In 2019, Pope Francis took a bold step by appointing Tagle as the head of the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples, putting him right at the heart of the Church's mission work. From this position, Tagle leads efforts to spread Catholic teachings worldwide, especially in places where the Church is growing fast. But there's more to it. As the leader of Caritas International, the Church's humanitarian wing, Tagle has shown he's fully on board with Francis's vision of service, compassion, and inclusion. This close collaboration has led many to see him as a likely successor to the papacy. It's not just about his credentials, it's also about what he stands for. Like Francis, Tagle has this humble, warm vibe that helps him connect with everyday people. Whether he's discussing deep theological questions or just sharing a meal with refugees, he has that approachable, down-to-earth demeanor that has made Francis beloved by millions. However, Tagle's rise hasn't just happened by chance. It reflects his alignment with the values Francis has promoted during his papacy. Values like compassion, inclusion, and a strong commitment to tackling global issues like poverty, migration, and climate change. For a while, it seemed like Tagle's path to the papacy was almost a sure thing. His growing influence and Francis's trust in him made him a top contender, praised for both his theological insight and his knack for staying connected to regular folks, which is increasingly important for modern church leadership. But as all eyes turn to Cardinal Tagle, he's got some challenges ahead. Beneath all the admiration, there are some issues that could shape his legacy and test if he's really ready to guide the church through tough times. Is he up for the job? Even though Tagle is a frontrunner to become the next pope, his journey to the papacy isn't a done deal. While his compassionate leadership and global appeal have earned him a lot of love, being so closely tied to Pope Francis might come with its own challenges. To really succeed, Tagle will need to prove he's more than just the Asian Francis and carve out his own identity in the eyes of the College of Cardinals. There are three big factors that could trip him up. First, he's got some serious competition from other candidates, like Singaporean Cardinal William Goh. Goh, like Tagle, is an Anglophone from Asia, which matches the Church's growing focus outside of Europe. But Goh also has a reputation for bridging gaps with the Church's conservative factions, a skill that Tagle, who is seen as more progressive, might struggle with. Second, Tagle's progressive reputation is a double-edged sword. While it's a huge asset, it could also be a liability. He's been a strong advocate for hospitality in the Church, pushing back against harsh rhetoric and advocating for inclusivity, especially towards LGBTQ Catholics. At the recent Lambeth conference, he pointed out the risks of letting ethnic and cultural issues get in the way of the Church's mission, while also calling out populist trends that twist the meaning of unity. These comments have really struck a chord with progressive Catholics, but they might also push away some of the more traditional members of the Church hierarchy. On top of that, Tagle's hesitance to take a stronger stance on issues related to China has drawn some criticism, especially as the Church tries to navigate its tricky relationship with Beijing. Some folks think that Tagle's quietness on this hot topic could be a problem, particularly when there are other candidates who might be more open to tackling these complex issues directly. Cardinal Luis Tagle's journey to potentially becoming the next pope is also made more complicated by how closely his rhetoric mirrors that of Pope Francis. While this alignment highlights his connection to the current pope's vision, it also raises some important questions about his leadership style and independence, qualities that could be crucial during the conclave. When it comes to rhetoric, Tagle often sounds a lot like Pope Francis, especially on topics like migration and populism. For example, on his way back from Kazakhstan, Pope Francis emphasized how migration can enrich the cultural and intellectual life of the West, pushing for policies that welcome migrants. Tagle has also warned against populist attitudes that might threaten the Church's unity, stressing the importance of hospitality and inclusivity. While these views resonate with progressives, they also tie Tagle closely to Francis's legacy, which could alienate parts of the Church looking for a leader with a more distinct and independent voice. Adding to his challenges, Tagle has faced criticism for his record as the Archbishop of Manila, where some believe he got too involved in partisan politics. For instance, he was quite vocal against former President Rodrigo Duterte, with critics arguing that he crossed the line and violated the separation of church and state. Louis Barocco pointed out that Tagle allowed homilies that included divisive political rhetoric aimed at discrediting the new administration and rallying opposition among Catholics. This has raised concerns about his ability to stay neutral and prioritize spiritual leadership over political involvement, which many think is essential for the next pope. Tagle has also been under scrutiny for not holding clerics accountable for misconduct during his time in Manila. This perceived leniency has led some to question whether he can enforce discipline within the Church effectively. But perhaps the biggest test for Tagle's leadership might be how he handles external issues, particularly his approach to China. His silence on this matter is notable, especially since Pope Francis is working on a controversial agreement with the Chinese Communist Party. While Tagle has mostly stuck to the Vatican's cautious line, avoiding direct criticism of Beijing, this could link him to growing concerns about the Vatican's dealings with the CCP, especially from those who feel the Church is compromising its values. It's particularly surprising that Tagle hasn't spoken up more, given his influential roles within the Vatican as the prefect for the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples and now pro-prefect of its successor, the Dicastery for Evangelization. He holds a lot of power when it comes to global church outreach, yet his reluctance to address the hot-button issue of the Vatican-China deal hasn't gone unnoticed. This is especially relevant considering his background and the ongoing territorial disputes the Philippines has with China. His quietness raises questions about his willingness to tackle politically sensitive issues, which some might see as a drawback for someone looking to be pope. The Dicastery for Evangelization, which Tagle led from 2019 to 2022, played a crucial role during the negotiation of the Vatican-China agreement. While he wasn't the one directly crafting the deal, he was responsible for overseeing the well-being of Chinese Christians during that time. His close ties to these discussions, along with his partial Chinese heritage, add another layer of complexity to his silence on this issue. A lot of people are worried about whether Cardinal Luis Tagle can handle sensitive global issues, especially with everything going on with China. As Pope, his silence is pretty noticeable right now. The trial for Cardinal Joseph Zen, who isn't shy about criticizing the Vatican's deal with China, was supposed to start on September 19th, but got postponed. Meanwhile, Pope Francis has been trying to keep things friendly with China, even asking for a meeting with President Xi Jinping during his trip to Kazakhstan. But that didn't happen. Francis is all about dialogue, but he seems to brush off Zen's criticisms, saying the elderly cardinal just speaks his mind. Tagle's lack of strong public criticism of the controversial agreement could come off as a weakness, especially since some big names, like German Cardinal Gerhard Müller, have openly voiced their disappointment about the Vatican's silence and Zen's unfair trial. By not distancing himself from this deal, Tagle might be seen as going along with a policy that some think undermines the Church's moral standing. His biggest hurdle could be shaking off the idea that he's too tied to Pope Francis's legacy. Even though he's popular, charismatic, and experienced, some folks think he's not as good as others, like Singaporean Cardinal William Goh, at uniting different groups in the Church. Most of the criticisms against Tagle, especially regarding his past in the Philippines, are old news and probably won't weigh too much on the College of Cardinals. But his hesitation to talk openly about the Vatican's China deal is a bigger deal, especially with all the scrutiny the Church is facing over its relationship with Beijing. This silence, along with his struggle to connect across different viewpoints, presents both a challenge and a chance for Tagle. If he can tackle these issues head-on, he could show that he's not just another Asian version of Francis, but a leader with a unique vision who can bring the Church together during tough times. If Tagle can take some bold steps, engage with critics, clarify his stance on tricky topics like China, and show he can bridge internal divides, he could really boost his chances for the papacy. The ball is in his court. The Catholic Church is at a turning point, with Pope Francis stepping down and Tagle potentially stepping up. It feels like there's a lot of uncertainty, but also a lot of promise. What do you think about this big change? Can Tagle handle what's coming, or do his past issues raise too many doubts? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more updates on this exciting time in Church history. The story is just getting started, and you won't want to miss what's next.